Welcome to this meeting of the Policy Subcommittee. I would ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Chairperson Nutter?
Present.
Ms. Doherty?
Here.
Ms. Martin? Here. 3 present.
Also joining us at the moment is the superintendent, Dr. Boyd, along with Latifah Phillips, our Equity and Outreach Officer. Also in attendance are Committeemen Andy Dakota and Bob Hoey. The first item on tonight's agenda deals with the policy regarding inoculation of students. It was brought to our attention at the beginning of the year that the policy may have been supplemented a bit. So I'd turn this over to Ms. Phillips or Dr. Boyd to speak on those things that changed at the beginning of this school year.
Thank you, Committee Member Nutter and members of the subcommittee. My impression of the policy and past management of the policy is simply that, is just impressions based on what I was told and experiences that others have. At the beginning of the year, my understanding was that we defer to the health department on recommendations on how to enforce our policies. The policy is the purview of the school committee. The policy largely mimics state law in relation to immunizations. When it comes to questions of immunizations or questions of the law and questions of student health, my practice, I believe, mirrors that of past administrations, which is to defer to lawyers in questions of law and defer to the health department on questions of health. We did just that at the beginning of the year. From my understanding, everything that we've taken, every step we've taken, consistent with the past, consistent with the law. There is a question, however, that I would ask for guidance from the subcommittee. Within the Lowell's context, we use 3 terms that in other communities are used interchangeably, but here are quite different. These terms are terms of admission, enrollment, and school assignment. Typically, they mean the same thing because in many communities in Massachusetts and elsewhere, you simply are going to the school closest to your home, and in a lot of cases, the school closest to your home is the only school. So whether you're assigned, admitted, or enrolled, it all means the same thing. Here in Lowell, all 3 mean quite different things. We have a centralized enrollment process that's facilitated through our Family Resource Center. You're admitted to school when you arrive at the school, and you're admitted through the principal and the school staff, and you're assigned to a school based on what, as you know, is a rather complex assignment policy, which I believe this subcommittee is going to take up at a later time. So as we were looking at policies, handbooks, other guiding documents related to this particular policy, it's unclear whether those 3 terms are used interchangeably. Are they intended to have the same meaning? Or should we provide one term with one meaning and go back through all of our documents to make sure we're using the same term? Because that could require continuous clarification depending on the elected body, the policymaking body, and the administration. That's one. The second is the health department. In our short time here in Lowell and trying to uncover the history of how this policy has been enforced, sounds like we use 2 different possibilities. One is to simply bar students from ever enrolling or taking part in any course pending an immunization review. 2, the other possibility is what's been referred to as a catch-up plan, whereby there's the 3 notice process that a student, upon review, has the opportunity to catch up with their immunizations. They're given 3 notices to do so and to fall into or to come into full compliance. Those 2 processes are used depending on the individual circumstances at the time. Being I'm not a health professional, neither is Ms. Phillips or those individuals within our Family Resource Center. we defer in those cases to the health department, but in every case, we also do have internally staffed attorneys that do review and make sure that any decision we're taking or making is in compliance with the law and in alignment with the law. So that's the context. There is definitely here, I think, a need, or certainly would be value, in making sure that we clarify the assignment, admission, enrollment definitions and terms, and we can bring to the committee examples of where they're used in different cases. I believe the handbook uses one term, the policy uses another term, and then in conversation we use yet a third term among the three. And that's unique to Lowell. I don't know if it was an intent of the policy in terms of design or just the fact that we were mirroring the law and other policies where those terms are interchangeable in other contexts. Is that enough of a layout, Committee Member Nutter?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ms. Doherty?
Just for clarification, I think when we talk about the three-notice system, my understanding was that was for situations where students are required at different terms of their academic career to get shots. And that was more if they were behind on their, let's say, I think middle school is a time that you're due to get another series of shots. So that, to me, would be completely appropriate to do the notices. Many parents might just forget, they need to do this follow-up appointment in the 5th grade or whenever it happens. That, to me, is very different from a student entering the district without having their records checked to make sure that they've gotten the baseline. And so I just wanted to be clear, when we talk about this catch-up plan, are we talking about the notices for students who are not on the schedule, who have not had their follow-up vaccinations on schedule? Is that what we're talking about specifically, or a broader context of all students coming in?
A bit broader, but I think there's a third possibility. So yes, in the case of students whose immunizations might have expired but already in school, but there's a third case whereby we have to review whether immunizations are even needed by a student to begin with. There are cases of students and classifications of students who are exempt from immunizations altogether. So there is a necessary review to determine whether a student is exempt altogether. These include, and Ms. Phillips is more well-versed in this law and this requirement than I am, so I may defer the microphone to her, but I believe these cases include homeless, refugee, and medically compromised students. So a review is necessary for whether a student falls into a classification that may be entirely exempt. In a couple of those examples, they may be exempt from some, not all. They may be exempt from all. They may be exempt from the immediate timeline and may have flexibility in timing. So the law itself is more complex than simply a yes or no scenario, which is why we typically go through legal review and then also deferring to the health department, which was my understanding why that flexibility was even there, because of the complexities in the law and because of the different scenarios. So that's kind of a yes and answer, Committee Member Doherty.
So in that circumstance, those three classes of students, they'd be basically adhering to that second protocol of they can go through the process and be enrolled and start, but they get 3 notices to then get themselves up to date. Is that?
Typically, I believe that's the case. Is that correct, Ms. Phillips? Okay.
Okay. I would think that they'd be, populations we'd be particularly concerned about. We wouldn't want them going without the necessary vaccinations in the long term.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. So any policy that would be a zero tolerance policy could then have a negative impact on our most vulnerable children if we don't undertake some type of flexibility to undergo a full review, which is my understanding why we have the 2 possibilities that ultimately the health department makes a determination based on the circumstances again at hand. And I believe they've utilized both in the past, most typically under the circumstances that Committee Member Doherty mentioned, but then also in the circumstances that you referenced, Committee Member Martin.
And the notification schedule is pretty short, too. It's like 2 weeks, where they get 3 notices or something within 2 weeks. Is that?
Yeah, let me defer the microphone over to Ms. Phillips, who's managed this process before and did so again this beginning of this year.
Sure, school committee members. So my understanding is that there is not a set period of time. I have heard 30 days, right, as a general time period. I think it is set by our health professionals. But the 30 days is kind of a guideline for a period.
Okay. I mean, I can understand using 30 days as kind of a last ditch, giving people room to maneuver within that, but it really does seem like our effort should be going towards making this happen in a much quicker way.
Yeah, I think definitely that's always the desire. I think there's two things that would have to be considered, at least, again, and I'm making sure that I can share with you, and I want to qualify all of my statements. My learning of this has evolved over my time as a school administrator. I'm not a health professional for the public, nor does the doctor before my name suggest a medical doctor. But across multiple states and multiple districts, multiple roles, the timeline could be adjusted based on the needs, particularly for a young person who may have a compromised medical history that may be temporary, not permanent. The timeline could also be adjusted based on the overall herd threshold of the school, which is then in different immunizations, there are different thresholds that we have to hit to ensure that the entire community is safe, which is always the priority. And I don't particularly like that terminology, I have to tell you, but that's the terminology that's become common within, I believe, the medical community, which is to suggest that for different types of ailments for which our young people are immunized, there are different thresholds that the entire community has to be immunized to say the community is safe. For some of the immunizations that we apply, those numbers are different. Could be 90% total, could be 75% total, to reach a threshold where we say there's no threat or risk of full outbreak. In every case, we're always beyond that threshold. And what I do believe is that if for any reason ever we were at that threshold or close to that threshold, we would rapidly move to a quicker time frame. In all cases here, and I think for the community, we should know, safety is always the top priority. We're always beyond that threshold. In every case beyond that threshold, in every case here in Lowell Public Schools, we've actually been beyond the state's average and also the reported average of Middlesex County. So our health professionals are doing an excellent job of follow-up, follow-through, and ensuring that our families are compliant with the law.
I would like to see us update this policy. I got to be truthful. I've heard more discussion on this issue, and not just by Ted Panos on CAP, but in people in my own family, a couple of who are nurses, who were very like, you guys got to keep this in place. So, the law is pretty clear, at least our policy is pretty clear, that the only exceptions would be made on receipt of a written statement from a doctor that immunization would not be in the best interest, or a family member with medical condition, or, religious beliefs. On the other hand, I don't think that stops us from enrolling a student or assigning them to a school. However, admission to that school should be based on having all of the required, and if they're missing one or two, then I think we go to that 3 notices and we try to tighten up that time frame. So I think it's a policy that we need to work with the health department and ask the administration to come back with an updated revision to this policy that also mentions, as Ms. Doherty put, once you get, after you gain admission, you are required to maintain and to continue, and that the same 3 notifications will go on if you don't meet those. And what the ending result after 3 location is, after 3 notifications, if you don't provide that it's either been done or you have a reason to have it not done, you'll be removed from the school. I think we need to just be very clear on that and tighten up this policy.
We could certainly do that. If it's okay with the subcommittee, I would like to make sure that our attorneys can draft that. Sometimes when there are attorney work products, we got to make sure we set a really clear timeline and expectation. What would be a reasonable timeline for the subcommittee?
Yeah, at least, I would say at least a month or so.
Within a month?
You know, if we could have it by the beginning of December sometime.
Beginning of December? I think that sounds reasonable, Ms. Phillips. All right, beginning of December, we can give you a recommended first reading to update the policy. What we will also do there is we'll go through at least a cursory review of where we're using those three terms and where we need to clarify those three terms, and maybe even a glossary might be the easiest way to go, just so that we can clarify what each term actually means in our context here in Lowell.
Mr. Dakota?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question in reference to what you had just commented on, Dr. Boyd, about, but who has the responsibility of keeping tabs on the numbers of percentages of kids that are immunized? Who's keeping track of that?
The data that I received that I quoted earlier came from the city through the health department, but I'm making an assumption there that the health department is keeping it. We all have the same data. It usually sources at the school through our nurses who are part of the health department.
Okay.
So it's a joint venture between us and the city, and I'd have to get back to you as the origin of the raw data.
Okay. Thank you.
For the December meeting, could we also get a report of how many students actually started the school year that did not have full immunization?
Sure, absolutely.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes, thanks. I definitely know I've had a few friends that just don't like to take a shot, you know? They don't want their children to take a flu shot. I'm not sure if it's about mumps and measles, if they feel the same way. But I remember a case going back 20-something years ago, we used to get checked for TB. And then when you get a positive test in TB, there's a pretty severe medication that you have to take for it. So I don't even know if we check for TB anymore, but I know a lot of these diseases are making a comeback, and it's kind of scary. It is kind of scary, but I think our health department in Lowell, I haven't heard many complaints about them. I think they stay on top of this issue pretty well. But I'd like to hear more about it in another meeting, how many kids aren't. So I know for sure it's not just religion. Some people just don't trust getting their kids shots. I know that for sure. Might not be a lot of people, but I definitely know a few. So I want to hear more about it. Thank you.
It used to be, as I believe, Mr. Hoey, it used to be an allowable feature of the law, personal opposition or belief, but that's no longer within the law. We certainly are, and we are proponents within the school system, and we advocate for our students to be immunized unless they meet one of the criteria, and we certainly do bar children from school if they're not compliant following a reasonable time frame to allow them to reach compliance. Just opting out for not wanting a shot, unless somehow, some way, somebody's utilizing one of the rules here incorrectly because they don't want to get a shot. They wouldn't be allowed in just simply because they say they don't want to get a shot. They would have to actually identify based on one of the reasons that's allowable.
Yeah. Just one more thing. When it comes to those type of diseases, it's like, are we checking enough different diseases, you know? I know working in a prison system, we used to talk about Hep C. There was like 4 million cases that people don't even know they have it, walking around with it. I'm not even sure if we can catch Hep C. I'm not sure about that, but it's really scary. This is a big issue, and I'm glad you're having a subcommittee on it, but I want to hear more on things. Maybe we should be checking for more diseases. Who knows? Thanks.
If there is nothing else on this, the next policy involves staff code of conduct policy revision. As everyone well, most of us, well, I'll get back to that one. No, I'm not going in order, sorry. Sorry, I didn't follow the order. The Staff Code of Conduct policy. As we all know, we had a situation earlier this year where it looked like a teacher had been arrested and charged, only to find out in the end that there were no charges and everything was dismissed, but it did cause quite a conversation in the local media, on social media, with concerned parents and community members reaching out, I'm sure, to everyone here. So we really don't have a policy that addresses exactly what to do in situations like this with the staff. I find it kind of ironic that we tell the kids in their policy, if you do this, you would be subject to this. And I think that's something that we need to look at. I think the existing code of staff conduct, the existing policy is very vague. So my recommendation would be to form a subcommittee or a advisory committee made up of not only the administration and someone from the policy subcommittee, but also from the unions that we deal with, to work cooperatively with them to try to draft a policy that, and would need, of course, to have legal involved in this to make sure that what we're suggesting is legal. But when a situation like this does occur, I think it's just proper that we have some way to address it and deal with it and have something in writing so that our staff knows what our expectation is. And it applies to us as school committee members as well as the administration and the teachers. Ms. Martin?
Thank you. So I do know that we have in place, we call it past practice, but I mean, the district has been in circumstances where we have had staff who are arrested for things maybe that had to do with their, things that happened during their workday or things outside. Do we have that kind of structured in a way that we could look at? That I know we have some that will go out on a paid administrative leave, some will go out unpaid, but I believe that there's a structure in place that we adhere to for that.
Yeah, I don't have that available for the subcommittee today, but I can provide anything that we have within our Office of Human Resources to the committee members under separate cover if you're so inclined.
I think what I'd like to see, and I think, for the purposes of this subcommittee, if we could have that in place, that may address many of the concerns that I think Mr. Nutter has, because I agree. I mean, the policy that we're looking at tonight really doesn't address when things do rise to that level of concern. I think the key thing for me is ensuring that what we put in place is responding to actual actionable events. I think that certainly, that there needs to be a line where if someone is arrested, that's one step. If they're indicted, that's another step. If they're convicted, that's another step. And I think that those are definable terms that I think the lawyers will be comfortable with. So I don't think we need to fashion something from whole cloth. I think we already have kind of the nucleus of how we want to respond. It's just a matter of kind of putting these two things together so that we can, have something in writing and that's very clear that, protects all sides. And I'm sure the union would be comfortable having that conversation with us.
Thank you. I think my colleagues have made some excellent points here. All I want to add is whatever we do, obviously we have to collaborate with our union members, our leadership but I think it really goes even beyond our union staff. I mean, we need to codify some sort of staff conduct, and as you said, if it's arrested, if it's indicted, if it's convicted, carry different responses with some flexibility, because every situation will be different, but it should be for every adult in the system, whether you're at a high administrative level, a principal, a maintenance person, a coach, and to have some clarification, because this is very vague and incomplete. But I think we have, because we've been a school district forever. Like, we're the oldest public co-ed school in the country, right? So we have had, and we don't have to go back that far, but we should be able to go back and see what have been past practice in situations where somebody's out on a DUI, for instance, or something like that, just, and have something that is fair and protects everybody, I think is just going to help in the long run.
Yeah, if I could point something out as you're bringing up dates, the staff conduct adoption date is July 9th, 1975. It references certain very subjective language within the policy that I imagine was intended to mean one thing in 1975, which I will accept all of the jokes, was prior to my birth. So I'm not quite sure what the standard was prior to me being born, but I'm sure it's different than 2019. We have a lot of policies like this, so this might be an opportunity like this, meaning policies that were prior to our current awareness in 2019. So perhaps this is an opportunity for us to look in, inventory all of these policies that maybe need to take another glance. Certainly can provide for the committee what we might call administrative regulations, what we do in cases such as X, Y, and Z. For the greater public here at this public meeting, what might be also needed for clarification, we said in the last instance that within our context, there's admission, enrollment, assignment, is not the same as in other communities. Well, within this time, what we mean by report could mean quite a number of things in this era of social media, in this era of fast-moving information. And there might be a need for us within our policy to define what it means by a report that will be investigated. In certain instances, there have been reports of things that, quite frankly, haven't been reported through any official channels that would initiate an investigation, yet they are perceived to be reports. So we are certainly, as an administrative team, ready to abide by any policy, but I think we might be at a time in 2019 where we also define what is a report that will generate the administrative actions that we're going to define within the regulation.
Absolutely, because in this, is we are both aware, we've seen instances on social media that are just, nothing's been officially reported, yet it doesn't stop it from being out there. And unfortunately, I think when you start looking for past practice, I've been led to believe that it's been done in the past on a case-by-case individual basis, and there's nothing or very little in writing, I think, that we're going to find that we have actually put down. Ms. Doherty.
Thank you. That made me think of something else. In addition to past practice, and maybe better than past practice, is looking what other districts have done to update their similar policies. Because I think then you've got the work's already been done. We might want to tweak it a little bit, but we're not starting over. And I think that a lot of what Mr. Nutter says about past practice maybe not being easy to actually even find, because I think it fell under personnel issues.
A lot of times.
So it wouldn't be something that the public would know about, or even the committee necessarily, unless it rose to that level.
Yeah, I can tell you, I send many emails out to concerned community members or family members related to two broad situations that we can't discuss in detail, related to student discipline and personnel actions. And I find myself saying quite often, due to the many laws that govern our work, it sometimes can be frustrating not to know the full details. But in those cases, certainly a guiding policy that at least allows people to know here's how we operate can certainly, while providing clarity to those who are administering and managing the district, can also provide a sense of confidence to the community. So I do think it's timely, and it'll be a value going forward. What is the timeline for the subcommittee on this one? We said beginning of December for the last one.
You're going to need a little bit more time with this. I would think that this would be somewhere in the February timeframe. It's just going to take, trying to get people together, trying to, even just look at what you have. An update in February would.
Thank you. I appreciate that recognition. I also would like to bring to the committee just the number of policies that are, as you know, 1993 was a landmark school reform act, and the policies we have, this one may not be relevant to that, but the many policies that we have prior to 1993 that are still on the books, it probably is in 2019 been enough time that we should probably take a look at all of those. So maybe an inventory of the number of policies that we have that are dated prior to 1993 might be a way to go going forward, to look at them just in some type of order. I don't know.
And by the way, 5 of your bosses have all been born before 1975, so I'd watch those jokes.
I said I was ready to be the subject of ridicule, not my bosses, for sure.
Mr. Dakota.
Well, actually, thank you, but Committeeman Doherty said what I was going to say is we should be able to get copies of policies from our surrounding communities. I'm sure they'd be more than willing to share those with us. And why reinvent the wheel if they've already got it already figured out? I think we should be looking at those as well in detail. Thank you.
Mr. Hoey.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad you told them to slow down, because October 11th, 1975, I got married, and that was 44 years of marriage. But getting on to this issue right here, I just got this printout from Mary Sheehan, and when I look at the second paragraph in the area of personal conduct, the committee expects the teachers and others will conduct themselves in a manner that not only reflects credit to the school system, but also sets forth a model worthy of emulation by students. That paragraph, I don't even have a clue what that's saying. Now, I know this was made in 1975, it was adopted, but some words should say you should use common sense. Common sense comes with these type of jobs. I knew I couldn't drink and drive, because if I got a DUI, I lose my job. So I had to watch out for that. The same thing when you're dealing with a patient in a hospital or a student in a classroom. You know you can't put your hands on children anymore. But at the same time, we have to use common sense. And why isn't the word in there that's saying common sense? You should be a role model. That's what you should be as a teacher, a role model. You shouldn't be doing anything wrong. And if you have a paper trail of that, which some people might have, we have to do something about it. So I think this has to be rewritten, without a doubt, and I'm glad we're working on these type of policies. Nice job, Perry. Nice job.
The final policy that we're going to discuss tonight is actually a new policy that is being brought forward to deal with equity and engagement gap. And I turn this over to Ms. Phillips for this.
If I could, prior to yielding the floor, I think there has been several references to what do surrounding communities have. So we thought to begin this conversation, we might bring you an example policy that another community has. So you have before you the sample or the example from Boston Public Schools. Now, we are not suggesting here that we adopt Boston Public Schools policy, but just as the committee mentioned, you should have within your packet the sample policy. Correct, Ms. Phillips? Mm-hmm. So within your packet, you should have the sample policy. There's a policy statement. They refer to it as the achievement gap policy. Different terminology, example policy that we would be referencing here. But again, not suggesting at all to the committee that we adopt or forward that policy, but instead it's just a reference point because this would be a new policy for Lowell Public Schools. Ms. Phillips?
Sure, thank you. So school committee members, I shared a couple slides with you which aren't required for our conversation, but just to kind of help guide our conversation quickly. The reason we're bringing forward this discussion is to gather your feedback as the policy-making body for the district, and given that this is a new policy that we're proposing. In the presentation, I just wanted to remind us of the core beliefs, and we've been speaking about the 5 core beliefs, and I just wanted to remind everyone that that's what's behind our proposal for this policy development, that a high-quality education is a fundamental civil right of every child, teaching and learning is at the core of our work, parents are our partners, there's no silver bullet to improving our schools, and every adult is accountable for the success of our students. We say this every time. I just wanted to establish that as foundational for this policy. And then our commitments to eliminate the racial, ethnic, linguistic achievement and opportunity gaps, provide equitable funding and resources, and engage all families with courtesy, dignity, respect, and cultural understanding. That's what we've been sharing for 3 months now, since we've been here with the district. On slide 3, I just wanted to acknowledge what we already know, that there are achievement gaps in our district. And the findings of recently released data, as well as prior data, do eliminate existing gaps in performance among student demographic groups. That includes English learners, students with disabilities, Hispanic students, African American students, and we've already taken steps to address some of these gaps this year. But what we're really looking to do is to identify and address root causes and barriers toward eliminating these gaps, and make a formal statement that this isn't just what the current administration believes, this is what the institution believes, right? Whether it's me sitting here or Dr. Boyd, as we move forward, our institution is committed to eliminating and reducing these opportunity and achievement gaps. So that's what's really behind the goal of gaining your input and hopefully support for moving forward with developing an equity and engagement policy for the district. On the last page, I share that we strive to position the school district for long-term sustainable improvement, and that includes crafting this meaningful policy which affirms the district's commitment. It's not specific to a person or personality, it's the institution's commitment. So through the leadership of our equity office, we're seeking your guidance as to whether this is the direction for the district to move in as an institution, because again, long-term sustainable means that this is past people and that it's the institutional commitment. We're looking for your support to convene a group of community stakeholders in this development of the policy, and then establish a timeline for presenting a final policy for school committee adoption. And as Dr. Boyd shared, in your packet, there is a sample statement and plan that was developed by a different district, Boston Public Schools. But is this the type of policy statement and plan that we as a public K-12 institution want to work toward and have in place for now and for years to come?
I don't believe we have a copy of that. We just have these 4 pages of slides.
It's not the one that says achievement gaps? Is that it? Is that it?
No, it was attached to the agenda when the agenda was posted.
No,
It was not.
We don't have a copy with us.
Okay.
Okay, let's make sure we get you that under separate cover. It'll be an example policy, but let me just kind of walk you through it. So our policy statements, obviously our policies are our guiding documents, which then direct our administrative regulations and direct our management of the organization. Right now, we have no policy governing the work of our equity office or the work that we are looking to undertake in terms of closing the opportunity gaps throughout the district. So the suggestion we have is that we frame the work, which will be a large part of our strategic plan, by a policy statement of the governing body, which is the school committee, that's built by our community, based on the values of our community, which certainly we put forward some fundamental commitments of the administration, which very happy has been embraced by this elected body, but this is just one administration, one elected body. And as we just said before, these policies sometimes can stand the test of time of multiple generations. 1975 in the last instance. So we believe the time is right for us to establish a policy. We're hopeful that that's the direction that the school committee wants to go, but we'd rather be more than hopeful and take the firm direction from the committee before engaging a community group to design a draft policy for review. We don't want to take that second step if that's not the guidance of the committee. So we would ask and request your guidance and your approval for us to engage a community group so we can bring back a draft policy. We will give you the example policy, and please let me know if you need further description. Ms. Phillips can actually read out to you the policy statement that Boston Public Schools currently operates under.
Thank you. You know, before you arrived, at least here, we had a meeting where we were talking about the position of HR director, and one of the loudest things we heard from people that night was to talk about the need for diversity and equity. And we've seen the test scores and the different achievements and the holes that you have pointed out. So I believe that this committee has shown to be very committed to wanting to establish equity in our schools and equality and diversity. So I think this is a good foundation to build upon. Ms. Doherty.
So I agree completely. We are all about moving forward with closing the achievement gap. We've got some really wonderful educational opportunities going on throughout the city, but as we know, it's not happening for all our students. I guess where my concern comes in, I'm fine with picking up words that Boston put together or anybody else. It's not so much, and I know that's the guiding, the words like to put it down, institutionalize it. This is our core belief. We want to close the achievement gap. We want to have equity at every school is performing at the high level, all that. But that's not the hard part. The hard part is going to be how we're going to do that. So when you talk about convening stakeholders from across the city, I'm hoping it's going to be more than just, so what would the pretty words be about how we want to close the achievement gap? Because I think there isn't a person on this committee who doesn't want to see all our schools be high-performing schools, right? It's just how we get there that's really going to be the challenge. So am I correct in assuming that the meetings with the community stakeholders is going to be more than just what are the pretty words? It's going to be what's the plan, what are the steps, what are the measures to show that we're moving in that direction, things like that. Thanks.
Yes, all of the above. The first deliverable would be the policy that would come to that'll frame then the remainder of the work. We bring it to the school committee for approval to adopt it as community values, as representatives of our community at large, for the school committee as those representatives to adopt that value of closing the opportunity gaps across the system as being the core work of this system. So we would envision this task force working long-term, but the first deliverable being the policy statement and then working from there.
Ms. Martin.
To Ms. Doherty's point, I absolutely agree. I think that coming up with I mean, honestly, we've got a list of core beliefs that you've provided to us a number of times so that we understand that this is what's guiding, and that's great. This is one more fundamental, foundational core belief that is part of all of our system, or we wouldn't sit here. I mean, so I think just in the last 5 minutes, Ms. Phillips, Ms. Doherty have articulated what this policy can be. It does not need to be, we don't need Byron to craft this for us. And I think that entering into a strategic plan process, this could very easily fold into it. It does not need to be a standalone process that we go through just to get us to the point where we can fundamentally agree that all kids need to learn, deserve to learn, and our system needs to be set up to ensure that they learn. So that part of it, I think, can certainly be folded into your overall strategic plan process. There's no doubt in my mind that that's going to be one of the strategic goals that comes out of this process, so why not just make it part of that? And ultimately, I think if we can come up with a compelling statement that perfectly encapsulates all of our collective belief that this is a fundamental role for education to play in our community, great. We can add that to this list of core beliefs, and I think, certainly you will not find a dissenting voice on this committee in that regard. So I guess overall, and you can correct me if I'm not, if you don't want to join in with me on this one, but less process, more end result. I don't think we need to go through a self-reflective, community-wide process to get to this place. I think we're already there, and if we can do that quickly, it gives us more time, more resources, more ability to call on our community to actually do the work that will help us close the achievement gap. Thank you.
We can draft a policy for first reading at our next meeting if that
Great.
so be the desire of the committee.
Mr. Hoey.
Thanks, Chairman Nutter. Latif, I'm sorry I didn't show up. You had something at Middlesex Community College. I just found out today because I don't check my emails all the time. I depend on Minerva too much, but could you briefly just tell me what you did there? Or what went on there, if you don't mind, just briefly?
Sure, briefly. So we kicked off our Distinguished Speakers Series, Diverse Voices. The intent is to elevate diverse voices and hear about, to hear different perspectives on education, on policy, on history that then impact curriculum, instruction, our relationships with each other, mutual respect, understanding. We brought, our keynote speaker was Councilman Joe Garcia. He's a tribal leader. He shared with us a Native American perspective on education policy and history, not only with our community members and our staff, but also with our students. And again, this is the first of many diverse voices we want to hear, learn, and then reflect on how do we use this new knowledge to evolve, within our curriculum, instruction, and relationships with each other.
Okay, so I'm sorry I missed that. I'll try to make the next one you have. Thank you.
Mr. Dakota.
Thank you, Mr. Nutter. The attachment that they didn't get, could we all get that, please?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And to follow up on what Mr. Hoey had said about this morning, I was at that presentation at the high school with Mr. Garcia. It was a fabulous presentation, and the kids were right there in his hand the entire time. A lot of incredible information that was disseminated by him, so well put and so heartfelt. And so I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much for bringing him in.
Finally, the last item on the agenda talks about outstanding motions on policies. There have been so far 11 different motions brought in dealing with different policies. I know Mr. Lay, I contacted him because he had brought one in on the attendance, and I didn't get that in for this meeting, but I told him I would make sure we did it for the next one. But, we've had Mr. Dakota and I on the recess policy, on the blue ribbon panels, and as Dr. Boyd mentioned tonight, when I first got on here, it amazed me that we had an 800-page policy manual, and it was only in PDF form. So last year we sent it out and we got it digitized. And it's also available not only on our website, but on the Mass Association of School Committees website, along with other. We do need to go through this policy manual, and it's going to take a lot of policy subcommittee meetings to do that. And it's going to have to be over time, because while we're trying to update this policy manual, I know you're also working on a strategic plan for the district. We have the upcoming budgets. So there's a lot on our plates, but I wanted the public to know we do realize there are many outstanding issues that have been brought forward that we have not yet had a chance to, to bring up and address, but we will. Ms. Martin.
I think to your point, Mr. Nutter, and I think it's certainly valid, if we're going to address the kind of gargantuan policy problem challenge that we have, I mean, I would recommend that this is something that we would be better served to do diligently and incrementally over time. If we were able to perhaps set a monthly meeting that every month we would address, the administration would drive it, 3 policies each month. Sorry, I'm just throwing that out as a number, but, something that we can structurally commit to and say, this is a high priority for this committee and for this administration, and we're willing to make the commitment that every month we will spend an hour, hour and a half going through these policies so that, I mean, honestly, at the end of the year, we may have just scratched the surface, but at least it would be a concrete, structured effort.
Yeah, that definitely is something we can certainly do. What has come up in suggestions as we ramp up the launch of this strategic plan is that there may be a good number of policies that are actually outdated since the role of the school committee has changed in the last 20, 30 years, because many of our policies are from 1975 and prior. I guess that was the last comprehensive review. The other thing I might just put within the minutes and share with the subcommittee members, everything the school committee does ultimately is around policy. So we may also have a need, as motions are coming forward, where it seems obvious that it would go to the policy subcommittee. Perhaps we need to utilize another committee as well, because everything that the school committee does essentially is policy. You're the policy-making body. So sometimes it feels like it should go to the policy subcommittee, whereas it could be perhaps more efficiently vetted through another subcommittee while the policy subcommittee is inundated with once-a-month meetings already. Yeah, sure.
School committee members, I just wanted to mention as a high priority that the review of the school assignment policy, that is a time-sensitive policy where any changes, if any changes are recommended, it's important that that policy is in place by as soon as possible, latest early January, because our families need to know how we're assigning schools for the next school year.
I just want to reiterate what Ms. Martin said, that you guys can drive how we attack the policy. I mean, I don't know if you want to go anything prior to 1975, or if you want to start with what most pressing issues. Obviously, we have 11 motions that have to be addressed, but I think absolutely the assignment policy is complex. It's something that families care very much about. It impacts our budget in terms of transportation. So I would highly recommend that that one get up there soon. Thank you.
Yeah, I do have a breakfast tomorrow at the McCullough, and families have asked that I put that particular one on the breakfast agenda. So we will certainly have that at the next meeting.
If there is nothing else, I need a motion to adjourn by Ms. Doherty, seconded by all in favor. We're adjourned. Thank you.